Sorry, how to play. The object of the game is to get all your pawns from the start space to the home space by traveling around the board clockwise as indicated by the arrows. Setup. Lay out the board. Each player picks a color and places their 4 pawns in the corresponding start space. Shuffle the deck of cards and place face down for a draw deck. On your turn, you draw a card and, if possible, apply its effects, then discard it. Each card says what it does, and I'll go over each of them later. If the card cannot be fulfilled, discard it and end your turn. Play proceeds with the next player to your left. You are only allowed to move a pawn out of the start space with a 1, 2, or sorry card. Pawns in your start space cannot move from any other card until they leave the start space. On a 1 or a 2, move your pawn directly below your start space onto the entry circle. If another player's pawn is on your entry circle, bump it back to start. You may not move a pawn to the entry circle if one of your own pawns is already there. You are allowed to jump over pawns on the board that are in your way, counting it as one space, but you may not share a space with another pawn. Instead, when landing on the same space as an opponent's pawn, bump their pawn back to their start space. If the space is already occupied by your pawn, you may not move there. If you can move, you must. If you can't, you forfeit your turn and the next player goes. In order to land your pawns in the home space, they must move in with the exact number. Anytime you land by exact count on a slide triangle that is not your own color, your pawn slides down to the circle at its end, bumping off all pawns back to start that are in the way. If you land on the triangle of a slide of your own color, you don't do anything. When you travel around the board and return to your starting area, instead of proceeding straight, your pawn goes into your safety zone. Only you are allowed to enter your color's safety zone. Pawns inside a safety zone may not be targeted by sorry cards. No pawn may enter its safety zone by a backwards move. However, you may move backwards past your safety zone, then on a subsequent turn, move forward into it. The cards are as follows. 1. Either start a pawn out or move 1 pawn forward 1 space. 2. Either start a pawn out or move 1 pawn forward 2 spaces. Whichever you do, even if you couldn't move, draw again and move accordingly. 3. Move 1 pawn forward 3 spaces. 4. Move 1 pawn backwards 4 spaces. 5. Move 1 pawn forward 5 spaces. 7. Either move 1 pawn forward 7 spaces or split the forward move between any 2 pawns. You cannot use a 7 to start a pawn, and if you use a 7 to get a pawn home, you must be able to use the remainder of the move for another pawn. 8. Move 1 pawn forward 8 spaces. 10. Either move 1 pawn forward 10 spaces or move 1 pawn back 1 space. 11. Move 1 pawn forward 11 spaces or switch any one of your pawns with any one of your opponents, so long as neither pawn is in the start, safe, or home spaces. You may forfeit your move if you don't want to change places and can't move 11 spaces forward. If the switch causes you to land on a triangle of another player's slide, slide to the end. 12. Move 1 pawn forward 12 spaces. Sorry. Take 1 pawn from your start, place it on any square that is occupied by an opponent, and bump that opponent's pawn back to their start space. If there is no pawn on your start or no opponent's pawn on any space, you forfeit your turn. The first player to get all their pawns to their home space wins. Check out the rule variation for adults.